Today's fighters have nutritionists, strength coaches, and recovery protocols designed by sports scientists with PhDs. They have heart rate monitors, custom meal plans, and training camps that cost more than most people make in a year. And yet, there's a question that refuses to go away. A question that lingers every time someone watches black and white footage of a man throwing punches in a basement gym wearing nothing but leather gloves and a pair of work boots. Were the old school fighters tougher? Not more skilled, not more athletic, tougher. The answer isn't simple. But the deeper you look into how fighters trained, fought, and survived between the 1940s and the 1970s, the more you realize that something genuinely different was happening. Something that modern science can measure but can never fully replicate. These men weren't just trained differently. They were forged by a world that no longer exists. This is why old school fighters were built different. Welcome to Loving Fighters. Start with the most obvious difference: fight frequency. In the modern era, a top professional boxer fights 2 to 3 times a year. That's standard. Some fight once. Some take 18 months between bouts, cycling through elaborate training camps and promotional tours before stepping into the ring. Now rewind. Henry Armstrong fought 27 times in a single year. Sugar Ray Robinson had 200 professional fights over his career and fought as often as 3 times in a single month during his busiest periods. Willie Pep amassed 241 professional bouts. Archie Moore had 219. These weren't padded records against nobodies. Robinson fought Jake LaMotta 6 times. Pep fought Sandy Sadler 4 times. These were wars against elite, dangerous opponents, repeated again and again, sometimes only weeks apart. The implications of that schedule are staggering. These fighters didn't have the luxury of peaking for one performance every 6 months. They had to stay ready constantly. There were no extended off-seasons, no deload phases, no periodized training blocks designed to bring a fighter to his physical peak on one specific night. You were either in shape or you weren't. And if you weren't, you found out fast. This constant activity did something that no modern training protocol can simulate. It built a kind of toughness that only comes from repetition under real pressure. Not sparring pressure, not drill pressure. Fight pressure. The kind where a man across from you is trying to take your head off and the only thing between you and a loss is everything you've accumulated through hundreds of rounds of actual combat. Robinson once said his training was simple. He ran in the mornings and trained in the gym with calisthenics, boxing, and rope work. That's it. No elaborate system. No periodization. He did road work in heavy army boots like nearly every fighter of his era. 5 miles a day, every day, in boots designed for construction sites, not running. When those boots came off and the ring shoes went on, his feet felt like they were floating. 6 minutes of shadow boxing, 10 minutes on the speed bag, 12 minutes on the double end bag, another 6 minutes of shadow boxing, 10 minutes on the heavy bag, 15 minutes of skipping, abs and medicine ball work. Then he went home. He only sparred to sharpen up in the week before a fight. The rest of the time, he stayed sharp by actually fighting. 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes more. He tap danced in the evenings, not as cross-training in the modern sense. He just loved to dance. And that rhythm, that fluidity, that ability to shift weight without thinking, showed up every time he stepped into the ring. As an amateur, Robinson went 85-0 with 69 knockouts, 40 of those in the first round. His professional record at one point stood at 131 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. The only man to beat him was Jake LaMotta, who outweighed him by 16 pounds the night they fought. Robinson avenged that loss 4 times over. Robinson trained in boxing by doing boxing. That might sound obvious, but it's a principle that modern fighters have largely abandoned. Today, a fighter's schedule is packed with strength and conditioning sessions, mobility work, recovery protocols, and sport-specific drills that simulate fighting without actually fighting. Everyone wants to know what exercises to perform rather than spending more time performing their sport. The old-school approach was the opposite. You learned to box by boxing. Shadow boxing, bag work, sparring, rope jumping, running. If you wanted to improve as a boxer, you boxed. The equipment was basic: 2 heavy bags, a speed bag, a few jump ropes, a medicine ball, and a ring. That was the extent of most gyms. Some didn't even have a proper ring. Fighters sparred in open areas with cement walls instead of ropes. And from those bare-bones facilities came some of the greatest fighters who ever lived. Rocky Marciano is perhaps the most extreme example of what old-school dedication looked like. He stood 5 feet 10 inches and weighed 185 pounds, undersized for a heavyweight by any standard. His arms were short, his reach was limited. He had none of the physical advantages that modern heavyweights consider essential. What he had was work ethic that bordered on obsession. Marciano ran 5 to 6 miles miles every day alongside his trainer and best friend, Ali Colombo, who encouraged him every step. He didn't jog. He ran uphill at full speed, then ran back down the hill backward. He trained in the mountains, in the rural areas outside New York, pushing himself through terrain that would break most runners. He shadowboxed in a swimming pool, standing shoulder deep in the water and throwing hundreds of punches against the resistance. 45 minutes of underwater punching. Not because some sports scientist told him it would improve his power output, because he figured the resistance would make his hands faster when the water was gone. And it did. His trainer, Charlie Goldman, a former bantamweight from the early 1900s, invented punch mitts by sewing foam into a pair of gloves because Marciano's accuracy was so poor in the early days that he needed a moving target to correct it. Goldman also tied string between Marciano's feet during bag work and sparring to improve his balance and footwork. Improvised, low-tech, brilliant. In camp, Marciano lived like a monk, bed by 9:30 every night, a strict diet monitored by Colombo. No nightlife, no distractions. His brother Peter later said Rocky was always in incredible condition and that he never received full credit for his conditioning. Marciano's gym sessions included hundreds of hours of sparring, continuous bag work, thousands of push-ups and sit-ups, and countless medicine ball shots to the gut. That last exercise deserves attention. A trainer would stand over the fighter and hurl a heavy medicine ball directly into his midsection, while the fighter tensed his core on impact. Again and again. Round after round, not once a week, every single session. Sonny Liston was famous for absorbing full-force medicine ball impacts from his trainer, and the practice became as synonymous with old-school boxing as the heavy bag itself. The purpose wasn't just core strength, it was teaching the body to absorb punishment without flinching, to take a shot to the body and keep moving forward without losing composure or breaking rhythm. Marciano retired 49-0 with 43 knockouts. No heavyweight in history has matched that record, and he did it with physical tools that most modern trainers would consider inadequate. But here's what the numbers miss. Beyond the training methods and the fight frequency, the old-school era produced a specific type of coach that barely exists today. Men like Cus D'Amato, Charlie Goldman, Jack Blackburn, Ray Arcel, and George Gainford. These weren't clipboard trainers running athletes through cookie-cutter programs. These were craftsmen who built fighters from the ground up, often spending years with a single pupil before that fighter ever saw a championship ring. Blackburn took Joe Louis, a young man from Alabama who could barely read, and taught him everything. The jab, the footwork, the timing, the discipline. Goldman reshaped Marciano's entire style despite his physical limitations. Ray Arcel trained two of the greatest 135-pounders of all time, Benny Leonard and Roberto Duran, decades apart from each other. The knowledge passed down through those relationships was irreplaceable. It couldn't be learned from a manual or a certification course. It was earned through decades of watching fighters bleed, lose, adapt, and overcome. And then there was Cus D'Amato. D'Amato believed that boxing was 75% psychological and 25% physical. He read Confucius, studied the art of war, and consumed every piece of literature he could find on human psychology, strategy, and the nature of fear. He wasn't just teaching fighters how to punch. He was teaching them how to think, how to manage terror, how to find clarity in chaos. The hero and the coward both feel the same fear, D'Amato said. But the hero uses his fear, while the coward runs from it. He took Floyd Patterson, a scared young boy from the streets of Brooklyn, and turned him into the youngest heavyweight champion in history at age 21. He developed the peekaboo style, an unorthodox defensive system built around a high guard, constant head movement, and rapid counterpunching. He invented specific training tools, the slipping ball, the willy bag, designed to ingrain the movements his style demanded. And years later, he took a 13-year-old juvenile delinquent named Mike Tyson out of reform school, moved him into his home in Catskill, New York, and along with his longtime companion, Camille Ewald, became Tyson's legal guardian. For years, D'Amato molded this troubled, fatherless kid into the youngest heavyweight champion in history. There is no such thing as a natural puncher, D'Amato said. There is a natural aptitude for punching, and that is different. Nobody is born the best. You have to practice and train to become the best. D'Amato didn't just train Tyson's body. He developed discipline in a fighter who had none. He enforced strict rules, early curfews, mandatory education, zero tolerance for drugs. He kept Tyson busy every hour of every day because he understood that idle time was the enemy of a troubled mind. Running at dawn, calisthenics by the hundreds, shadow boxing, bag work, sparring, studying fight films from D'Amato's extensive library every night, 7 days a week. Modern training experts have criticized that schedule as overtraining, but D'Amato knew what he had. and he knew that the mental transformation mattered as much as the physical one. Tyson didn't become the youngest heavyweight champion by accident. Every decision D'Amato made was calculated. There was a method to the madness. This kind of mentorship, this total immersion of a trainer into a fighter's life, was common in the old-school era. Trainers didn't just show up for sessions and disappear. They lived with their fighters. They ate with them. They monitored their sleep. They were father figures, psychologists, and strategists rolled into one. That depth of relationship produced something that modern training facilities, no matter how well equipped, often lack: trust built through shared sacrifice. The old-school era also bred toughness through circumstance. These fighters didn't come from comfortable backgrounds. Most came from poverty. Many were immigrants, or the children of immigrants, fighting not for glory but for survival. Every immigrant neighborhood had its champion, and boxing was a flag of racial or ethnic pride. Rivalries were built on ethnic tension, and you could pack 10,000 people into an arena for a fight between two neighborhood heroes. Henry Armstrong grew up picking cotton in Mississippi before moving to Los Angeles to box. LaMotta grew up fighting kids on the streets of the Bronx while people threw money into makeshift rings. That was how his family paid bills. No wonder he was so tough. When he finally got a shot at the middleweight title, the mob told him to take a dive first. He did, against Billy Fox, because it was the only way they'd let him fight for the championship. Then he went and won the title anyway. Bo Jack defended the lightweight crown on a broken leg. Robinson, when pressed by the mob to throw a fight, said no. Willie Pep fought Sandy Sadler knowing Sadler was bigger, younger, and hit harder, because refusing to fight wasn't something men of that era did. The world these fighters grew up in didn't allow for softness. Poverty toughened them before the gym ever did. War toughened them further. Many of the best fighters of the 1940s served overseas before returning to the ring. They had seen things that made a boxing match feel manageable by comparison, and the fights themselves were longer. Championship bouts went 15 rounds, not 12. That extra 9 minutes of fighting, 3 additional 3-minute rounds against a world-class opponent trying to knock you unconscious, demanded a level of endurance and mental fortitude that modern fighters are simply never asked to produce. 9 minutes doesn't sound like much on paper. In a fight, it's an eternity. The reduction from 15 to 12 rounds came only after the tragic death of Duke Koo Kim following his bout with Ray Mancini in 1982. Until then, every championship was a 15-round war, and fighters trained accordingly. Their conditioning had to carry them through an extra quarter of the fight that today's boxers never face. Imagine Robinson against LaMotta for 15 rounds, Marciano against Ezzard Charles for 15 rounds, Archie Moore recovering from 3 knockdowns in round 1 against Yvon Durell, then 3 more in round 5, only to knock Durell out in the 11th. That fight is considered one of the greatest in boxing history. It happened because Moore had the character to survive the kind of punishment that would have ended most careers. None of this means modern fighters are weak. They're not. The athletes of today are bigger, faster, and have access to better medical care, better nutrition, and better understanding of the human body. But something was lost when the old ecosystem disappeared. The constant fighting. The bare-bones gyms where the people mattered more than the equipment. The trainers who built fighters from nothing and stayed with them for decades. The mental conditioning that came not from a sports psychologist with a clipboard, but from a man who had lived through the same struggle and could speak from experience. The willingness to solve problems through improvisation rather than technology. Rocky Marciano punching underwater in a swimming pool. Robinson tap dancing for footwork. Goldman inventing mitt pads out of old gloves. D'Amato studying Confucius to understand fear. These men figured it out with what they had, and what they produced was extraordinary. The old school fighters were built different because the world that built them was different, harder, simpler, more demanding, less forgiving. They didn't have heart rate monitors to tell them when to stop. They had trainers who looked them in the eye and told them to keep going. They didn't have recovery protocols. They had the next fight in 3 weeks, and the knowledge that if they didn't show up ready, they didn't eat. They didn't have social media to build their brand. They had a record that spoke for itself, and a reputation that traveled by word of mouth through smoke-filled arenas and Friday night television broadcasts. The lesson isn't that modern training is wrong. It's that toughness, real toughness, has never come from equipment or technology. It comes from repetition under pressure, from simplicity executed with extraordinary commitment, from mentors who invest not just in your body, but in your mind and your character, from a willingness to do the hard, unglamorous work every single day without shortcuts and without excuses. The next time you watch old footage of a fighter shadowboxing in army boots, throwing punches in a pool, or absorbing medicine balls to the gut in some dimly lit basement gym, remember what you're looking at. You're not looking at primitive training. You're looking at the blueprint, the original code. the foundation that every modern training method, no matter how sophisticated, was built on top of. They didn't have much, but what they had, they used completely. And that is why old-school fighters were built different. If you found this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into combat sports history. Drop a comment telling me which old-school fighter you think was the toughest of them all. Thank you for watching Loving Fighters. I'll see you in the next one.